explain interview as a method of data collection. 5 marks. Interview. The interview is a process of communication or interaction in which the subject's offered interviewee gives the needed information verbally in a face-to-face situation. All the interview is generally associated with counseling. For psychotherapy, it is used effectively to control useful information about individuals in many research situations. Interviewing is a popular way of gathering information in qualitative research. Interview provides a wide range of data. It provides information about persons' feeling, perceptions, and opinions. Interviews should not make presumptions about the respondents. Interview requires high-level questioning skills and active participation. Interviewing requires face-to-face contact or contact over telephone and calls. For interviewing skills, interviews may be used either as a main method or a supplementary one-in-one collection of research-related data. These are most often used to gather detailed qualitative data. Interviews are conducted one-on-one, while focus group interviews were conducted in small groups. Both are usually conducted with target samples of staff, administrators, youth, families, community members, and so on. Interviews can also be conducted either face-to-face or telephonically. Most questions are open-ended, in which responder responses are provided in notes or in a transcription manner. In some cases, interviews generally employs structured quantitative response method. Interviewing is the only suitable method for gathering information from illiterate or less educated respondents. It is superior to other data gathering methods. People are usually more willing to talk than to write. Once report is established, even confidential information can be obtained. Definition of interview. A method of data collection in which one person, interviewer, asks the questions from another person, respondent, conducted either face-to-face or telephonically. The conversation among more than one people, interviewer and interviewee, where questions are asked by the interviewer to obtain information from the interviewee, is known as interview. Interview is a two-way systematic conversation between an informant and an investigator. It is generally intended to get information that is relevant to a particular purpose. It requires not only conversations but also learning from the respondent's gestures, facial expressions, and poses and his or her environment. Characteristics of interview. The participants, the interviewer, and the respondent are strangers. The relationship between the participants is a transitory one. Interview is a mode of obtaining verbal answers to questions put verbally. The investigator records information furnished by the respondent in the interview. Interview is not a mere casual conversation exchange but a conversation with a specific purpose. The interaction between the interviewer and the respondent need not necessarily be face-to-face because interviews can be conducted over phone, telephone also. Although an interview is usually a conversation between two persons, it is not always limited to a single respondent. Interview is an interactional process. The interaction between the interviewer and the respondent depend on how they perceive each other. Interview is not a standardized process. It can be modified according to the situations. Benefit of interview. Provide in-depth and detailed information. Permits greater depth of response. Data from illiterate subjects. Clarify misunderstandings. Asks questions at several levels. Helps to gather other supplementary information, example economic level living conditions. Use of special devices. The interview can use special scoring devices, visual material in order to improve the quality of interview. Accuracy can be checked. Flexible and adaptable. For people who are unable to write their response, interview is very advantageous. For example, patients with eye patches or interactions. Types of interviews. 1. Structured directive interview. 2. Unstructured non-directive interview. 3. Semi-structured interview. 4. In-depth interview. 5. Focus group interview. 6. Telephonic interview. Structured directive interview. Structured interview is a means of data collection in which the interviewer has an interview schedule in which the questions are listed in the order in which they are to be answered. These interviews are also known as standardized interviews. In other words, this is an interview made with a detailed standardized schedule. Same questions are put to all the respondents and in the same order. Interviewers are not permitted to change the specific working of the interview schedule. Questions. Structured interview consists of the following characteristics. Interview schedule is formalized and has a limited set of questions. The aim is to ensure that each interview is presented with exactly the same questions in the same order. It increases the reliability and credibility of research data. It minimizes contacts defects wherein answers given to survey questions depend on the nature of proceeding questions. Merits of structured directive interview. Data from one interview to the next one are easily comparable. Recording and coding data does not pose any problem. Attention is not diverted to event and time-consuming conversation. Demerits of structured directive interview. It tends to lose the spontaneity of natural conversation. The way the interview is structured may be such that the respondents' views are minimized and investigators' on biases regarding the problem under study assessed. The scope of exploration of information of data is limited. Unstructured non-directive interview. These interviews are also known as non-standardized interviews. Unstructured interview is a method wherein the questions can be changed to meet the respondent's intelligence, understanding, and beliefs. Questions are changed based on how it is each individual person responds to the questions. In this type of interview, the interviewer increases the respondent to talk freely about given topic with minimum prompting. In this, no pre-planned schedule is used. Characteristics of unstructured interviews. Interview schedule is not formalized and has open-ended questions where there is opportunity to ask questions not planned before. The aim is to explore the information from the respondents. It increases the reliability and credibility of research data. It facilitates the natural and obstructed proceedings of the interview procedure. Merits of unstructured non-directive interview. It is less prone to interviewer bias. It provides greater opportunity to explore the problem in an unrestricted manner. It is useful for gathering information on sensitive topics like divorce, social discrimination, drug addiction, etc. Demerits of structured non-directive interview. The data obtained from one interview is not comparable to the data from the next. Time may be wasted in unproductive conversation. There is no order or sequence in this interview. This requires more skills on the part of the researcher. Semi-structured interview is a flexible method that allows you questions to be brought up during the interview, depending upon the situation during the interview. Semi-structured interviews have the following characteristics. Interview prepares an interview guide, which is an informal list of topics and questions the interviewer can ask in different ways from different participants. Interview guides helps the researcher to focus on the topics at hand without constraining them to a particular format. In-depth interview. This is an intensive and investigative interview conducted and aimed at studying the respondent's opinion and emotions on the basis of interview guide. This requires more training and interpersonal skills than structured interviewing. This deliberately aims to elicit unconscious as well as extremely personal feelings and emotions. This is designed to encourage free expressions of effectively charged information. Focus group interview. Focus group interview is an unstructured group interview technique where 6 to 10 members are brought together under the guidance of a trained interview to focus on a specific phenomenon. Its purpose is to gain insight from the appropriate sample or target population. The researcher tries to focus his/her attention on a particular aspect of the problem. It is a carefully planned discussion where the interview guides discussion according to a written set of questions on topics to be covered. In focus group interviews, special attention is given to specific topics or ideas. An attempt is made to concentrate the discussion on the real effects of a provided experience to which respondents have been asked to respond. The interview is aimed to analyze the subjective experience of the respondent, that is his or her opinion or emotional response to the topic of research. Characteristics of focus group interview. It consists of 6 to 10 members, homogeneous in terms of demographic and socio-economic characteristics. Duration of the interview is 1.52 hours. All information including facial expressions and body language is recorded. It is a moderator to lead the discussion. Permits the interviewer to obtain details of personal reactions to an experience. It is free from inflexibility of formal methods. There is plenty of opportunity for respondents to present their views. The interview can freely choose the order questions and ensure the extent of asking the questions. Merits. Wide range of information is collected. It stimulates new ideas and creative concepts. One person's comments made to trigger a response from another person, leading to an in-depth discussion on the topic. It increases excitement in a group. Participants feel more comfortable to answer in a group with similar interests. It involves many participants at one time. Demerits. There are chances of client and researcher bias. It is difficult to moderate. It is difficult to code, analyze, and interpret. Focus group interview is not a representative of general population. Telephonic interview. Telephone interview is a non-personal method of data collection. This method of collecting information consists of contracting respondents on telephone itself. It is used widely in industrial server, particularly in developed regions. Merits. It is more flexible and a quick way of obtaining information. Cost is relative less and rate of response is high. Respondents' characteristics, facial expression, and environment cannot be observed. Possibility of bias of interview is more. Interview in process. The interview process includes the following steps. Preparation for interview, which includes fixed appointment, appearance and dress, similarity with interview schedule. Fixed up appointment. Interview should fix of the topic and time of interview with subject ahead of time. It would save time of interviewer. Appearance and dress. The interview should dress in a fashion very familiar and with due regard to the sensibilities of people who will be interviewed. The interviewer should be pleasant and should communicate a genuine interest. Familiarity with interview schedule. Interview schedule must be studied carefully and the interviewer must practice reading it aloud to be very familiar with all the questions. The interviewer must also be able to list items to respondents without errors. Pre-interview introduction. Researcher was introduced himself or herself to all respondents respectfully as per their cultural practice. Identify the respondent by name. Select a setting with as little disturbances as practical. Describe the intention of the interview. Mention the confidentiality terms. Describe the interview structure. Give hints so as to how long the interview would go on. Ask them if they have any questions. Developing rapport. After primary introduction, the researcher starts developing rapport with respondents. This is developed through confidence building and understanding the concerns of the respondents by beginning of the conversation on general topics. Carrying the interview forward. After establishing rapport, the technical task of asking questions from the interview schedule starts. While interviewing the respondent, following guidelines should be used. Start the interview. Ask only one question at a time. Repeat a question if necessary. Try to make sure that the subject understands the questions. Listen carefully to the subject's answer. Observe the subject's facial expression, gestures, and tone of voice. Allow the subject a sufficient time to answer the questions. Do not show signs of surprise, shock, anger. Maintain a neutral attitude with respect to controversial issues during the interview. Take a note of answers that seem to be vague or ambiguous. Ask additional questions to follow up clues or to obtain additional information. Do not hurry the interview if silence is too prolonged. Introduce a stimulus. Recording the interview. It is essential to record responses as they take place. Good information can be taken by note-taking. Tape recorder or video recording may be used to record the responses of respondent. Shorthand may be used to record responses. Closing the interview. After the interview is over, a polite leave of the respondent should be taken, thanking him or her with a friendly smile and saying goodbye. Advantages of interview. Interviews are useful to obtain information about people's feelings, perceptions, and opinions. Interview allow more detailed questions to be asked. High response rate is achieved. Respondents' own words are recorded. Ambiguities can be clarified and incomplete answers are followed up. Interviews are not influenced by others in the group. Meaning of questions can be clarified. Disadvantages of interview. Interviews are time-consuming and costly affairs. Different interviewers may understand and translate interviews in different ways. There are high degree chances of interview bias.